Welcome to Globespan. I'm Paul, New Tennessee of Guyana. Today we are going to have a very, very interesting discussion. The title of our discussion today is Civil Society and Government Relations, Opportunities and Challenges. And we have some very interesting guests. We have with us Miss Vanda Radzik, an independent social and sustainable development advisor and consultant, and a person who has been identified for quite some time now with civil society organizations in Guyana. And we have with us Mr. Fred Collins, retired insurance executive, a company director, and a human resource advisor. Mr. Collins also heads a civil society organization, and he will tell us about it. And we have Mr. Floyd Haynes, the founder president of the Roraima Institute and president of Haynes Incorporated. And we have with us Mr. Timothy Jonas, chairman of a new and united Guyana and an attorney at law and senior counsel. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get right into it. Vanda, can you speak a bit about yourself, a little bit, and then we will begin to discuss the question of government and civil society relations.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Tennassee, and I'm very happy to see all these wonderful panelists and Mr. Haynes, etc. Thank you. So, yes, I am Vanda. I am a long-standing human rights defender, advocate, activist, and leader in Guyana's civil society and NGOs. I was part of the whole democracy movement since the days of Walter Rodney and Isu Pasod and GUARD, and that whole process of the whole pro-democracy, fair and free elections process. Highly involved in that in my youth. I'm a co-founder of Red Thread Women's Organization, which is recognized internationally, regionally, and nationally. I'm currently a commissioner on the Constitutional Rights, Women and Gender Equality Commission, and I am the current chair of the Guyana's Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, which is made up of 3 equal sectors comprising members from government, from industry, the companies of natural resources, and civil society. And we have 3 co-chairs from those sectors, and we take turns in chairing the Guyana EITI. And so I'm doing that at present.
For our audience, because this program is usually an educational program. Acronyms. What is
EITI? It's a global. It is the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, and Guyana is one of 3 Caribbean countries that has joined the EITI. The other countries before us, we're the newest one, is Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, and now Guyana.
Wonderful.
So
wonderful.
basically what it has to do, Paul, is that on an annual basis, we're now preparing our 3rd financial year report. It's always 2 years prior to get all the information in. And it aims to reconcile the payments in and out from government and the payments in and out from the industries involved in the extractive sector. In Guyana, we focus on 4 extractive industries: oil and gas, mining in all its forms, gold mining, bauxite, quarrying, etc., forestry, timber, and fisheries. So anyway, all of that.
Okay. No, that's wonderful. I just returned from Guyana, as you are aware, and I had a very, very extensive 2 meetings with the former executive director of that organization. So I'm very updated with what's going on there. Mr. Fred Collins, please introduce yourself, my brother, and explain a bit about what you do in terms of civil society. We're not hearing you. We're not, Devin, we're not hearing him.
It's a very small mic just near your name, Fred, that you have to unmute.
Devin, you want to work with him while we continue the program? So, Vanda, since you are the one of the civil society people here, there are two of them we have here. I'm gonna enter into the subject that we are dealing with now. What is the current state of civil society government relations, formally and informally? I say formally because there's a difference between civil society and civil society organizations. One is very formal, and there are others that could be informal. So, since you are more linked with the formal ones, how would you assess the current relations between civil society and the government? Because while I was in Guyana, I read an extensive uh, report on the president of Guyana and his views about civil society organization.
Yes, well, thanks very much, Paul. I see Fred is on right now though, so I'm just wondering.
Fred, are you there? Can we hear you? He's there, but he
I
doesn't
see.
have
So they're
voice.
still working on it. Okay, yes. So, well, all governments, basically since, well, what can I say? Since more of a democratic culture was returned to Guyana way back when after the end of the Burnham regime and the constitutional dictatorship and all of that mess that went on, even from the time of Hoyt coming in to today, the public, or I should say the formal notion out there is that civil society is, in inverted commas, important. It plays a role and all of this. And this is guided, of course, by the United Nations and all of those international rights conventions that Guyana has signed on to actually since the 70s. However, that is the general sort of notion out there. But there has been times when civil society and the leaders of independent civil society, and I am related to the advocacy and the sort of advocacy and activist base of NGOs and civil society, so I can speak from that perspective. And that
We must Vanda, we must point out to people that civil society organization does services, they do advocacy, but some of them do both services and advocacy.
Yes, exactly.
Correct?
And
I also want to point out, Vanda, as we go along, because we want to educate people more.
Anyway, so the origin of the term civil society arose actually from the Latin America experience, where you had military juntas and military regimes, and then you had the non-military, and that was the civil. So that was a kind of origin of the term civil society. I personally still prefer non-governmental, because I think you would have the governmental or the government type of organizations, and then you have the non-governmental ones. We in Guyana, the civil society and NGOs, and I think generally with civil societies globally that are activist and rights-based, the private sector is not considered part of our forum or part of our platforms, because they have a specific function, which is business. So I think there needs also to be an understanding that the private sector and the companies have their own platforms and their own bases, and the activist or the rights-based NGOs have their own. There is also then the faith-based organizations or the religious organizations. and they again sort of have their own platforms. But civil society or non-governmental organizations basically largely are anything other than the government. So it is a very
Yeah.
loose and baggy sort of set of institutions out there.
Okay.
At
I
the
just
moment,
want to compliment what you're saying by adding that when the United Nations was founded, one of the agencies that was established was ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council. And what they did in the beginning of those days was to establish a space at the United Nations for civil society organizations. And one of the prominent, what you call the United Nations refers to civil society organizations as you do in Guyana, as non-governmental
yeah,
organizations. The World Bank and the IMF refer to them as civil society organizations. Here in America, they are being defined as non-profits, but they all basically mean the same. I mentioned the point about the United Nations because you mentioned it just now, that the labor movement is a very important
yes,
aspect of the United Nations ECOSOC. And under the leadership of Kofi Annan in the 80s and into the 90s, Secretary General of the United Nations, there was a proliferation of conferences globally on almost every issue, from social development to financing to development to environmental issues. And hundreds of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, have been participating. So it is true that you are a part of a global movement. As a matter of fact, just for our audience, is that civil society organizations, NGOs came together and established in Brazil the World Social Forum, which was an umbrella where all NGOs met in order to discuss policies and so forth that civil societies were advocating. I was at one in Mumbai, India, but it started in Brazil and their people continue. So I'm very glad that we have this opportunity for you to speak about it. Fred, are you back? Uh, is Fred back? He still is. Okay, let's see if we get Fred in.
He's unmuted.
So while he's getting there, Vanda, just in one sentence, how would you define the relationship currently with the government and civil society? And one sentence, so I could bring in the others to comment on how you would see, how would you like to see it improved?
yes. Well, from time to time, well, first of all, civil society, the whole of humankind and the whole of human society cannot, of course, function without civil society and non-governmental organizations. And you very well pointed out the whole role of that, essentially, at the UN, and we are all part of the UN. At the moment, there are some, yes, there are some difficulties and there are some differences between the NGOs and the government on certain issues. Having said that, though, their attempts are always made, and we welcome them when NGOs and civil society are asked to participate and to make inputs in government and in national policy. But it seems as if, and this has to do with several factors, but it seems to some of us anyway, that the rhetoric is very good, but in actual fact, there does appear to us to be a shrinking in legitimate civil society space, and especially those advocates and leaders and rights-based and human rights defenders that lead aspects of civil society. Thank you.
That's very interesting. A shrinking base. Okay. Timothy, as a politician, as a politician, how do you view the current relations between government and civil society? We are not here.
some very wide questions, Paul.
Well, you could narrow it. You're
Yeah,
a brilliant lawyer.
So I hear you have definitions of civil society. So we've included in civil society everybody that's not government. As Vanda says, it's a baggy definition, but it's the only one I think will work. We got to ask ourselves, what's the reason to create a civil organization, a group of people who have a similar purpose, objective? And to me, the main reason has to be lobbying and public awareness and government awareness. Many voices will have more leverage than one voice. So I see any civil organization, any civil group, as essentially a lobby group for a specific purpose to meet an agenda, which may be a good agenda, may be a bad agenda. The thing is that in any democracy, a government is interested in keeping votes and keeping its voters happy. So it is more interested if a larger group is speaking with a single voice than just a couple individuals. For that reason, as a general principle, I think any civil society group is a good thing. In Guyana, of course, we have our own peculiarities, and therefore, necessarily, any conversation needs to condescend from the nice generalizations of academia into specifics.
Boy, we are really having problems with the Guyana internet system. Floyd, you wear several hats. You're the head of a nonprofit, but also you're a businessman, and you are probably could be called an international businessman and a national businessman. What's your view about on what has been said so far, and how would you like to see government and civil society? Oh, you're back, Timothy? No, we're not getting him.
Well,
go ahead, Floyd. Oh, are you back, Floyd? Timothy?
Yes, well, I'm hearing you quite well. We had a power outage.
Yeah. I've been in Guyana. I've followed what is happening. Go ahead, Timothy, before Floyd comes up.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't know where you lost me and where I lost you.
I will tell you where I lost you because I paid very careful attention to what you said. You said that civil society organization in Guyana has peculiarities.
Right. So, whereas I believe in the importance of civil groups and civil organizations as lobby groups and groups to direct public attention to specific areas of need, I think that if we are to assess, first of all, their effectiveness, and second of all, their desirability, we need to be looking at specific examples rather than just an academic general discussion about hypotheticals.
Do you have anything in particular you'd like us to discuss, Timothy? A specific?
Well, I like Vanda's reference to the Private Sector Commission, for example. Vanda mentioned that they are essentially a commercial lobby group, a group that is focused on things of business. Of course, I agree. But that being said, the Private Sector Commission may well be the most influential and the best organized group that we have, and the most focused lobby group. So perhaps as a template, they can be an example of what is right and what is wrong, and what can be accomplished and what can't be accomplished in our democratic structure, given the pros and cons and the tugs of war that take place in a government trying to keep their voters happy.
Floyd, what is your take on civil society, the role of civil society organizations, and the government civil society relations?
Thank you, Paul. Well, the role of civil society is to hold government accountable. They do this through advocacy, lobbying, and they do things like advance policies in the best interests of the people. What has happened in Guyana, and I don't live in Guyana, follow the news like everybody, but it appears to me that this relationship between civil society and government needn't be adversarial. It can be collaborative. You can engage someone and hold them accountable and still not have a contentious relationship. The other thing I would say about civil society is that civil society need not be partisan. You have to be consistent in your advocacy and in your lobbying efforts. And because what happens if you lose that objectivity, you then lose the moral authority. So you have to be consistent in your advocacy. And at times in Guyana, the advocacy tends to be partisan. And those are the kinds of peculiarities that I think Tim was referring to. But I think there is a role for civil society. Vanda is absolutely correct. It's existed from time immemorial, and no society functions without it. I would like to see a better working relationship between civil society and government. Less partisanship, more objectivity.
Fred, are you with us? Is Fred with us, Devin, or he's not with us? It's okay. Keep trying. It's a pity because then we're only left with one civil society person who will have to rely on. Vandana will work you very hard.
Paul, can I come in here for something?
Yeah. Look, Vandana, anytime you feel like coming in, you want to ask.
So I heard what Mr. Floyd Haynes was saying, but we can't also contradict what are the essential differences and the roles of government and civil society. And we always have to ensure that, as he said, civil society holds the government accountable. Well, I think we're getting Fred.
Are you there, Fred? Fred, are you there? Yeah, we're hearing you. Yeah, Vanda is speaking. When she's finished, we'll ask you to speak.
Just taking up a point from Floyd, so that because civil society has to always have its own integrity of speaking truth to power, it also cannot compromise some of those values and some of those the ethical values that also guide civil society when it is necessary for them to speak very clearly and firmly with the full voice and agency that they have when it is required that there is criticism of the government. What I will agree with is it can be civil, because even pickets and protests are legitimate under our Constitution, and they can be held in the way they are legally supposed to be held. And that is also part of the role of civil society. So the point I'm making is, in an attempt to be in inverted commas civil, we must never also compromise what is our integrity, our standards, and our raison d'etre of speaking truth to power when that needs to be done. And from time to time, Floyd, we do need to be somewhat uncompromising, and wherever compromise and common ground are available on the basis of ethics, then of course, common ground should be and is frequently met between civil society and government, especially on matters to do with policy and with the upholding of the rights under our Constitution. So I'd like to thank you for mentioning some of those things. Thank you.
Paul, let me make a point.
Go ahead.
In response to Vanda, no, I am not at all suggesting that you must compromise any of your values or principles. It was, of course, Dr. King that said we must disagree without being disagreeable. But what I am suggesting is that there has to be consistency in your outrage, not rage. And what I mean by that, because when you're not consistent, you lose credibility. And if civil society is to be effective, it has to be consistent in its criticism of government and government policies, regardless of who is in power. And there are times where some groups, not all, some groups have been partisan in their outrage and criticism. And I think that is a bad, bad way to.
Well, I'm glad to say that I am one who has been equally and even-handedly critical of the PNC and the PPP and all of its various formations. And also, I am proud to say that when the PNC or the PPP or what the coalition or whatever does something that is good for my country and my people, I say that. And I think that that is also a hallmark of the NGOs and the civil society organizations and platforms that I am affiliated to and are members of. So just to put that on record. Thank you.
Mr. Collins, you were out and now you're in. Can you please tell us a bit about yourself and the nonprofit, the civil society organization you lead?
What, can you hear me?
Devin, yeah, we're hearing you.
Excellent. So sorry about the glitches. I don't use Skype to connect. Normally it's Zoom or something else. But here we are. Now, when we're talking about Transparency Institute, first of all...
No, Fred. Oh, yeah, good. You're going to tell us about yourself because we didn't get to introduce you properly. So please tell us about your organization.
Yes. Transparency Institute is an affiliate of Transparency International, which is the global anti-corruption body. You heard just now about the EITI, as Vanda explained. EITI is an offshoot of Transparency International. That's just by a matter of historical record. So our mission is to fight corruption. So essentially, that is what we were born to do. What has become of that over the years is that we are noticing that there's a tendency for corruption work, anti-corruption work, to become more and more linked to other things. For example, only today I was looking at the human rights and corruption, the connection. The position now with many world organizations is that corruption is a human rights issue because, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can go into that. But what that tends to do is that people are beginning or have begun to look to us who have started a focus on anti-corruption work to also speak out on human rights issues. Now, as you probably know, corruption is a day's job by itself, and so there would have been levels of expectation which were not matched by our resources. Now, let me try to oh, by the way, we have rules. I heard a mention about rules. Tiggy steadfastly tries to stick to its rules. We have a code of ethics and we also have a mission. Anything we do is guided by those rules. What that means to other organizations is that we are not going to be joining any organization that cannot present us with its rules of operation. That helps to protect us from a lot of stuff. Now, to go to what was said just now, I think by Floyd, if I remember.
Fred, I'm going to take a break here because we have to take a break for Globespan,
Sure.
who sponsored the program, and we'll come back to you as soon as we can.
Flights to Guyana have never been cheaper. Check out these non-stop direct fares from JFK to Guyana. One way from $150 and round trip from $344. From Guyana to New York, one way from $210 and round trip from $360. These are non-stop direct flights to and from Guyana on American, Caribbean, or JetBlue. These cheap fares will not last, so call Travelspan today. In New York at 718-845-0437. That's 718-845-0437. In Georgetown, call 227-1701. And in Berbice, call 337-4287.
जन्म जन्म का साथ है तुम्हारा हमारा.
Bollywood on the Beach is a family and friends event with Bollywood Entertainment. July 14th to the 18th, enjoy a 5 days and 4 nights all-inclusive vacation with your family and friends and your culture. Performers from India, Pakistan, Trinidad and Guyana will be live at the resorts with your favorite Bollywood songs. In Punta Cana, Dominican Republic, stay in the family section or in the adults-only section and enjoy over 12 restaurants, 11 bars, 7 pools, play areas, spas, and exclusive beach area. Your all-inclusive Bollywood on the Beach vacation is from $1,095 per person, which includes your airfare, transfer, hotel, and all you can eat and drink. Make it a family and friends reunion in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. Flights available from all U.S. cities, Canada, Trinidad, and Guyana. For rates, date, and more info, call Travelspan at 212-243-0865. In Canada, call 647-557-6200. In Trinidad, call Amirals at 645-1604. And in Guyana, 227-1701, or visit us at travelspan.com.
The Curry Roti Box is now available. Select your meal. Choose from chicken, duck, goat, or lamb curries, plus pepper pot, chicken tikka masala, lamb vindaloo, and roti. Your choice and your selection. Make up your own Curry Roti Box. We will ship directly to your home or job. Unbox your favorite curries, rotis, pastries, plus order your favorite West Indian sodas and much, much more on allfromOneSupplier.com. Treat yourself or send the Curry Roti Box as a gift. Curry Roti Box is available with free shipping to all U.S. states and free delivery in New York. Order now your favorite curries, your fish, meats, pastries, sodas, and much more. Get all your West Indian and Indian food, plus your West Indian groceries from allfromOneSupplier.com. It's free delivery and free shipping. Log on to allfromOneSupplier.com and place your order today, or call 718-551-3292. Again, that's allfromOneSupplier.com.
Announcing Curry Duck Curry Competition 2022 in Cancun, Mexico.
Hey, y'all take y'all eyes on past week? Last year, y'all take all my cousins to Punta Cana and slaughter them. I drink and sport up. Now y'all want to take another set of us to Cancun? Well, yes. And wait, now y'all taking Raymond Ram Narain, Terry G plus Tassa. Okay, y'all take Raymond, Terry, and the Tassa and go along your way.
Break it down, dee 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 down, dee down ding. Break it, dig it, dig it, dee down, dee down ding. Break it down, dee 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 down, dee down ding. Hey yo, my sweetheart, say I'm addicted to you.
Make it a family and friends reunion. Curry Duck Curry Competition 2022 in Cancun, Mexico on July 28th to August 1st. For more info, call Travelspan at 212-243-0865. In Canada, call 647-557-6200. In Trinidad, call Amirals at 645-1604. And in Guyana, 227-1701, or visit us at travelspan.com.
Are you looking for investment opportunities, or retirement, or even to relocate to Florida? Then Orlando is the place for you. Great deals with spacious land are available. Call Shanisa Jabbar for all your realtor needs at 321-217-1556. That's 321-217-1556. Or email her at shanisajabbar@gmail.com.
Globespan is back, and we are discussing civil society and government relations. And we are listening to Mr. Fred Collins, who is with Transparency International in Guyana, and he's taken on the big job with his colleagues to combat corruption in Guyana. Mr. Collins, please continue where you left off.
Wonderful. Hearing me now?
Wonderful. We are hearing you.
Wonderful. So essentially, I was going to engage the point about being consistent. And I want the audience to know that it doesn't matter how consistent you are if there are people who are clever enough to paint you as inconsistent. So we got to be very careful about that. And that is what we have had with certain accusations that have been made against not just Tiggy, but other people. So in terms of our recent history, let the audience understand that as one of our recent colleagues, I have to say now from OGGN, reminded us, because he found one of the reports from 2018. We have been in the business of monitoring the oil industry from since 2018. In fact, it goes back before that, since 2017. You would recognize that that is the time of the coalition. We noticed that Kaichur News is saying that they welcome, while mentioning that we have been for years in the process of focusing on the oil industry. They said that they're happy to see us join. Well, we want to set that straight. Tiggy has been leading the fight against corruption in the oil industry. In fact, we are the only ones who set forth certain arguments with regard to the contract, which we have seen validated in terms of it was obliquely and indirectly validated by a recent decision of the CCJ, meaning when they said there is no such thing as unfettered discretion, and no minister can exceed his authority and grant however many blocks he wants, and he's given a certain latitude. But to focus on the point of what my brother was saying there, and I think perhaps Vanda, I just want to redirect that it needs to be very clear that if people are going to try to paint you as inconsistent or selective, then you are now placed on the defensive. And what Tiggy has managed to do is to throw the accusation back at our accusers, because we are now asking them. Glad that Vanda mentioned those days of the 1980s, before I was so politically conscious. She was in the struggle, and so was the Guyana Human Rights Association, the Catholic Standard. So we have asked those people, we said, now it's our turn. You tell us where you were when people like the GHRA were fighting in those murderous times. Those we have written that. So we have thrown it back at them. That imbroglio that we saw in the post-election time, we said was a shouting match compared to them. So if you want to ask us those questions, you tell us where you were in those murderous times. So we have now thrown it back at the people who are claiming that we have been inconsistent. We have been consistently, we have led the way in terms of the petroleum industry since 2017, not in 2018. The records are there in the newspapers to prove what we're saying. And finally, where Timothy, where he said that the private sector commission might be a model for, we accept no such argument. In the first place, as somebody said, they are a lobby organization, and they are motivated by interests which do not necessarily coincide with anti-corruption. Let's put it that way. And so the kind of struggles that we are going to find as bona fide civil society organizations are not theirs. So we don't agree that that is any model for us to follow.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, Fred, I think we have to give our audience a bit of background, because you see, when you were speaking, it assumes that people know what you're talking about. Now, first of all, TIGI is Transparency International Guyana. So we have to let our audience know. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't know about civil society organizations in Guyana, but they have recently became interested when they heard the president of Guyana was critical of civil society organization. And I'm going to raise that issue, but I want us to be concrete also and talk a bit about ETI, go back to your issue of the oil contract and about corruption. I think that would be enough for us to deal with in this program. And Vanda knows a lot about ETI, you know a lot about the oil contract and about corruption. So the background is that the president of Guyana and also a columnist in Kaicho News have said that the civil society organizations that are in Guyana were basically silent in the 5 months that folks were fighting to have a transparent and free and fair election. And as such, you all have lost the moral authority to speak on issues. So I would like to first ask Vandana, what is her reaction to that? Because I read it in the newspapers.
Paul,
and then Fred, what is your
reaction? Well, Paul, that is just rubbish. And they keep spewing this kind of nonsense. And I know that they all, I am a member or I'm affiliated to a number of civil society organizations and NGOs. And I myself authored quite a few letters that several people, I think in one case 75 representatives of organizations and individuals signed the letter condemning that that reprehensible attempt to rig our elections in that imbroglio, to quote Fred. And every NGO and civil society organization that I know of condemned that nonsense, including some people within civil society who might very well have voted for APNU. I'm very happy to say I did not vote for either the PNC, the PPP, or APNU in the last elections. I chose to vote for a smaller party because I was one of those Guyanese that for the longest time I'm looking for change and for the end of this partisanship and this tribal war between the PPP and the PNC and whatever formations they choose to dominate. And we in Guyana have to end it. So when I was surprised that President Ali would join this chorus, because it is rubbish. And if it is that they want to say that certain civil society organizations and leaders never spoke, let them say who they were. Let them say who they are. If it is libelous, we take them to court. Because the organizations under fire right now include the Policy Forum Guyana. I think it includes the TIGI, Fred Zone. It certainly includes the Guyana Human Rights Association. And all of those organizations did speak about the I can't even find the words, the disgrace of the attempt at rigging in our last elections. And that is also a fact. And the loudest voices that came to the fore and spoke out were who? Were citizens and civil society people. And that is also a fact. So so Paul, it is really shocking to hear that kind of thing. And coming back, if I can just say, coming back to partisanship, no one in the history and the whole of our history in Guyana is more partisan and race-based party politics partisanship than the two main parties and their cohorts. And that is a fact. So when you talk about who is a partisanship and who creates the conflicts and the tensions that rips our society down the middle, it is sad to say it is the main two juggernauts of parties that we have. And civil society must continue to speak out about both of them when they are involved in corruption, when they are not being consistent to their own rules and manifestos and standards and rhetoric. And it is the role of civil society to say that without fear or favor. And that is our role under the Constitution and those laws and rights that we adhere to. Thank you.
Fred, the background to this issue or controversy between the president's views and civil society is that a letter was circulated saying that something to the effect that Guyana is in a bad state or something. And later I read that your organization said that even though your name of your organization was on that letter, that you did not agree with what was written in that. Is that correct? And can you give us a background to that famous letter? That
Who are you
the
asking?
bone of contention.
Who are you asking to speak?
Fred.
Okay.
Fred?
Yes. Now, one has to be very careful in terms of your choice of language. But what I mean by that is that we were called by a junior functionary in the ministry who asked if we had said words to the effect that the government is out of control. And
yes,
we wrote, because we are very wary of our words being misquoted. And we wrote and we said we did not use those terms. What we said is that the government was insisting in controlling several agencies that needed to be independent. And we stand by that position. So this is why I say we have to be very careful that we said we did not use those words that we were accused of saying. That is I understand the newspaper having the right to editorialize. We said, or we wrote what we said, and we stuck by what we said.
Okay. We got that. It's very clear. Floyd and Timothy, do you all have any questions to ask Vanda or Fred, since they are civil society leaders and the controversial issue? Timothy, you have any comments or questions for them? We're not hearing you. Timothy.
Let me say, first of all, Paul, in response to what Vanda said, I will attest that I have seen a letter carrying Vanda's signature where she protested against what happened during the elections. And I have always had the sense from her writings that her approach has been neutral, recognizing the view that I also have, as you know, that the race game is played by the two political parties and divides us. So I will attest to that. I'll step back from her defense of the civil societies generally. You see, part of what was done, the pendulum swings, and this is tit for tat. So APNU tried to rig the election, and the whole country saw that. But now, pendulum swings, and PPP is not going to let that go. They are relentlessly good at that drum. I'm not getting into right and wrong, but what they will do is they will paint with the same brush any dissenting voice.
Yes.
By saying, all of you people are anti-PPP. You're not concerned with fairness or honesty. Where were you when these terrible goings-on were going on in 2020? So Vanda and her group got tarred with the same brush unfairly. That doesn't mean that all of those civil societies are impartial. And Floyd made the point well, it is a well-made point, that those civil societies are, for the most part in Guyana, badly flawed, because they are, for the most part, partisan, equally blindly loyal, equally rabid, equally ethnically aligned. Now, to go back to the Private Sector Commission, in my view, the Private Sector Commission falls exactly within that description. Blindly loyal, blindly aligned, don't care a damn, going down one road with one party. Now, I was quite shocked when I heard Fred suggest that I had called the Private Sector Commission a model. What I said about the Private Sector Commission is that they are the most visible and the most cohesive, and that our conversation needs to condescend on particulars. We need to be discussing specifics rather than hypotheticals, and maybe a discussion can start with them. At no point did I say they were a model, and as you know, your program is recorded. I would invite Fred after the show to check, go back and listen to the whole program, and if he heard me call them a model in any way, I will come back and apologize, because I didn't do that. Fred needs to listen a bit more carefully in his defensiveness. The reason I singled Vanda out in what Vanda said about her protest in 2020 is I am also of the view that Transparency in Guyana has equally demonstrated that it is not impartial. And I have never heard from Transparency Guyana during 2020 any criticism. Fred is now president and is on the show. So I would ask Fred on this show if he would say publicly on this show right now that he condemns the APNU rig of the elections in 2020. And if he says so, I will be happy and I will look at transparency again with new eyes. But it's a simple question and I would like to hear the response.
Fred, do you have a response?
Of course. Let me deal, first of all, with Timothy's rejoinder to my comment about his use of the word model. All I will say is that is what I thought I heard. We are in using technology, which can sometimes present us with gaps. I thought I heard Timothy say that the private sector is a model, and he said that in the context of civil society groups. If I heard wrong, then I apologize, but that is what I recall hearing. Now, let us go to his question. The answer as to whether we condemn it is, if the question again, I'm saying, I don't know if I've heard probably. If it is in the present tense, the answer is yes, we do condemn. If it is in the past tense, the answer is again yes. Furthermore, we not only said, we wrote against it. We wrote an article, it is titled Tiggy's Selective Advocacy. And we addressed that accusation and we put the links to the statement that had been made by Tiggy then on the previous leadership of the Troy Thomas. Now, in addition to that, we had our deputy, Mr. Alfred Boulay, who was involved with the recount, actively involved with the recount.
Yes.
So I don't know what else. We said, we wrote, and we said that we wrote. It is a matter of public record. And let me take the opportunity to emphasize, we have thrown the accusation back at our accusers. It is in writing in our recent articles. Since you are so interested in where people were, we are asking you where you were at more intense times in this country. Vanda knows where she was. We are asking the people who are accusing us where they were. Okay? Because those times required real heroes, not the shouting match that we had.
If I could, Fred, I'm very glad, Paul, I'm very glad.
We lost Fred again.
I want to say something.
If you could get Fred back again.
I'm
yes,
very
Vanda,
glad that Fred has said what he said here. I'm sort of surprised that Timothy would have challenged it, because these things are there for the record. They're there for the record. So many of the organizers. I'm also an ordinary member of TIGI. And I'm affiliated with so many, with a selective number of civil society organizations and NGOs. And all of those that I am affiliated to or am a member of, we definitely and definitively spoke. And you know what? We spoke before many of the others the private sector and these people raised their own voice. We were in the lead with that from day one. We also helped monitor that recount. Mr. Alfred Bulai, who was the deputy of TIGI, was himself one of the independent annotate counters of the votes there. Several members of NGOs and civil society also participated and helped monitor. We were foot and step with Prime Minister Mia Mottley and her team. Many of us knew members on that team and got daily reports from them. I know myself and others wrote Miss Mia Mottley directly, and we actually sent it through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and all of that. So, to me, when I said I'm surprised, the columnist in Kiteshore News, I will not comment on that particular element, but I'm surprised that President Ali would be carrying this line because, he's not being fully informed, and I don't.
Okay, Vanda, I want to move to something, a couple of things that is very substantial.
Paul, can I
relation? That because we only have a couple of minutes more, and I don't want to just dwell on that because it's not sufficiently productive, because the civil society organizations are not going anywhere. They're going to be there. And I want to talk about some real concrete thing. But Floyd, is there anything you would like to comment on this conversation that's been going on?
Yeah, first of all, I liked him. I want to commend Vanda. I saw letters written by Vanda, and I remember reading it, and I'm saying, yeah, way to go, Vanda. So she has been consistent. But let me say this. Listen, I'm a friend of Dr. Ali. I make no apologies for that. I'm not here to defend him. He can defend himself. He's quite capable. But what I would say is that not all, but some. There is no one in Guyana who can argue that there were some, or there are some civil society organizations that has been hyper-partisan in their analysis and in their criticisms. Some of them, several of them. And it's not just to do with the 5-month standoff after the election. You can go back to 2015 when the contract was signed. There's protests on the street right now. There's a suit in court to throw the contract out. Where was that lawsuit? That contract was signed in 2015. Where was that protest when it came out that the bonus was collected a year ago, but was hidden from the people of Guyana? Where were the marches on the street? And again, I am not painting with this is the danger we run into when we try to paint with a broad brush. We are not saying all, but there is no one can tell me that there are not several NGO or civil society organizations that are hyper-partisan.
Floyd, you need to name them, because you see, this is the same painting with a broad brush. Say who they are and let them verify, because just as Tiggy was painted with a brush and that was an untruth, maybe we need to know, because when you say several, I don't know who these several are. I can try to
let me put the question back to you. Let me put the question back to you, Vanda. Or would you say that all civil society organizations in Guyana have been objective and consistent in their criticism of government?
Sorry.
Could you say that?
That there are civil society organizations that are affiliated to a particular party, affiliated to PPP and to PNC. Yes, they are, but it's both sides. There are so-called civil society organizations that are apologists and propagandists for the PPP, and that are apologists and propagandists for the PNC. I do not consider those to be rights-based advocacy type of organizations that are rights-based, and that is what we are saying.
I don't think Tim or I took a position. I don't think Tim or I took a position one side or the other. We took a position on lack of objectivity in some civil society organizations, and you have just confirmed that there are some that are politically aligned.
Yes, and but those to me, you see, those to me are not the type of, I would say, I don't know, the type of civil society and defined NGOs that relate to the human rights, that relate to rights, that relate to citizens' rights and our voice and agency as part of what citizens do. Those are partisan organizations and label them as such. But you see, Floyd, when you say several NGOs and civil society organizations do this, I don't believe that is true. And coming back to the private sector, to the best of my knowledge, represents no small businesses, very few small livelihood businesses. They're an elite, kind of an elite thing and all of that. So, you know, I mean, I would like to, I mean, what we once had, sorry about this, Paul, but what we once had, and we need to do it again. I was part of that. Some years ago, either the Canadians or the UN funded a project to create a directory of NGOs and civil society organizations. They were defined at the beginning. So these party-affiliated ones were not in there. These were the organizations that were rights-based and services-oriented and so on. And they could include women's or social organizations, you know, that maybe were related to a particular party, but they do services. And it was defined, and a list of them was compiled in this directory. And of course, it is dated now. It was 2 decades ago or so. But I really believe that that might be a very useful kind of activity to do now, so that we can define the categories of NGOs and civil society organizations along the lines I'm describing here, and have them cataloged. Thank you.
I want to put this in a bit of a larger context. In the context of Guyana civil society organizations, as Vanda is describing them, is recent in terms of the history of Guyana. The labor movement has been the pioneer of that. And we have had a lot of problems. I was the leader of a political movement and the director of international affairs for a union. The TUC was affiliated to the PNC at one time, the GAU to the PPP. And across the world, we have always had the problem with the relationship between union, party, and state. Now, NGOs also have this relation. Guyana is a small society. People have ethnic cleavages, they have political cleavages, they have historical political past, and so all of these play into the situation that we are facing currently. But beyond that, now, I want to go to the point that there are 3 issues that I'd like to look at very quickly because of time. Is the ETI. Quite recently, the executive secretary of the director was sent on leave. He's on leave until the end of March. And there has been a new appointee. I happen to know both men very well. And it has created some controversy in civil society. And Vanda, you are directly involved in ETI. Is that correct?
Okay, Paul. So first of all, just a correction. The former national coordinator, Dr. Rudy Jadopat, was,
yes.
I'm not sure about was sent on leave. I don't follow that. What happened?
I am aware of that. I've had meetings with him, and I'm aware of that. Yeah.
If I could say for the record, Dr. Jadopat, who served EITI extremely well, professionally and competently, his contract came to an end. It came to a natural end. He was there for 3+ years, maybe nearly 4, and his contract came to an end. And the post was advertised publicly in the press for persons to apply for the new, the new phase, let us say, of the EITI. Dr. Jadopat did apply. There were other candidates who applied. They were assessed. We asked the then chair of the EITI, who was the co-chair of industry, and he agreed to sit and in the interviews and do the assessments. Dr. Rudy Jadopat was assessed. He did receive, he was assessed with the others, but he did not emerge from that process as the top candidate. And that is a fact. So there was something in the press that goes on that he was put on leave and that this and that, but the fact is the contract came to a natural end. and a new process was publicly advertised. There were several applicants. They were shortlisted, all of this, and Dr. Premizir ended up as the candidate with the highest marks. I was not part of the assessment process, but I think that in future, one of the things that might be useful for all organizations that are oversight committees and that are multi-stakeholder committees is that maybe one of the questions that may be asked is in terms of your own political partisanship in your career. I think it is a useful question to ask, and it should be answered honestly, probed, because in of course, in a CV, you might not put that in, or you might, when you're doing your CV for any position, you might, decide what you're going to prioritize, what you will not. But just as a kind of a cautionary tale and moving forward, those sort of questions for something such as a multi-stakeholder group that is supposed to be independent and not non-partisan, I think that is the kind of question that may be useful to be asked. But as I said, Dr. Jadokat's term came to a natural end, and the assessment process has now put Dr. Premizir there. Just for the record again, the multi-stakeholder group has not issued any comment of its own on this. We try to reach, our rules are that we make decisions by consensus. So that is where that is. There are 3 other posts advertised that are going to be assessed next week for 3 other staff members of the EITI Secretariat. And that is
you would agree that ETI is a very important organized body in terms of the future development of Guyana, correct?
Well, yes,
ETI, do you value it? Do you highly value it?
I think it is, because, and again, it is one of the few oversight bodies or national bodies in Guyana that has equal representation of the government, civil society, and the private sector. Let us see.
I want to leave that there, Vanda, and say that I'm going to keep looking at it. We're going to look at it to see if that becomes a model of how we could have a working relationship with the government and civil society, because it touches on the vital resources of the country and the health of the country. I want to take this opportunity, Fred, to ask you very quickly, what is the state of corruption in Guyana, and how is your organization battling with it? Because over the last 56 years, Guyanese have been a victim of corruption in a big way.
The answer,
Fred?
Yes, the answer is our CPI, the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, is one indicator of that. It indicates the perception from the international standpoint, and we are low in terms of performance. While we are low, as our reports try to make out to establish, we have been consistently over the last 4 or 5 reports on the improve, and we attempted to make that point. Unfortunately, that point got lost, because apparently there were things operating in the heads of the people who were reading it, that no matter what we said, they saw corruption and we were accusing them. And so the CPI is one indicator, but there's a lot of corruption that does not get measured in that. And the average citizen, for example, from the police, from the procurement process, we get reports of that. So it indicates that there's a lot of corruption in our country. So that would be the short answer to your question.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. I just want to take this opportunity to raise with you guys. I know you have formal civil society organization, but down in the grassroots, a lot of people, most of the people of Guyana are not spoken for. The major problem in Guyana is poverty. You know why I say that? We are the third poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And we have a lot of problems. I have before me here a petition, which was prepared by an attorney of law, Mirza Sahadat in Skeldon. Mirza was always active against the dictatorship in the 80s. He was a candidate in my political movement that was anti-dictatorial. And in this petition, we have a problem with music nuisance. Now, people are playing music in front of people's homes. A guy came out and he complained, and the three of them killed him. They killed him. Now, since his death, it continues. Mirza's mother is 95 years old. She can't sleep at night. I have this petition here with me, which is really well written. And it is what I will call a policy brief. And they are not getting any response from the police. They are not getting response from the powers that be. And they have made a number of recommendations within the law that has to be done, laws that exist that are being implemented. Now people can't sleep. Now I went further to investigate in other parts of the country to see if there's a pattern. And I even spoke to police, and they told me that they get reports. And sometimes if they take a position to deal with it, they get transferred. So I think the sense I got, and I do a lot of listening interviews, and I've been to about 4 regions, there are a lot of real issues down in the grassroots there that I don't think that our civil society is capturing and voicing. And I've come to the conclusion, like on my little Facebook, I said today, when I saw 2 young teenagers again who were killed on the road, that death stalks the roadways and the communities. There is no end to the slaughter on roads of Guyana. All the billions of oil revenues will not resolve these problems. The problems are more fundamental and existential. Guyana is a broken society. In 56 years, half the population was forced to leave. We are the 3rd poorest country in the Western Hemisphere today, and the people are in a state of despair, and they continue to migrate. Additionally, Guyana has a very high suicide rate. Yet all we hear about is a promise that life will be better with oil revenues. So I want to ask Vanda and each of our panelists here tonight what they think, what really is the state of Guyana today. And if Guyana is a broken society, why is it I've not heard? I've been looking at the newspapers, traveling around the country. I've not heard voices that addresses comprehensively the causes and advocating prescriptions for a broken society. And I believe that oil revenues, no matter how much they will be, in Guyanese colloquium, would be pouring water on duck back. So what do you all think about that? The informal civil society, the people down there in the
well, Paul, I want to commend you for your Facebook comment. I am not on Facebook, but I would love you to send it to me in my email. And the petition of the Berbice people is excellent. We have done, at least in the organizations that I am related, we frequently write in the newspaper, and we spend endless hours in police stations and in government offices representing poor and vulnerable women, especially those that are victims of domestic violence, gender-based violence, rape, and the rest of it. The commission I'm on, this is a daily task. Red Thread and Help and Shelter that I support. I'm affiliated with Red Thread. This is what we do every day, every single day. Organizations like Help and Shelter are representing, counseling, sheltering battered women. So again, you know, this is it, that it is what the press chooses to put out there. Several times my commission, which is a constitutional commission, have done press releases and have invited press. We are never mentioned in the press. And they told us bluntly, that is because Women and Gender Equality Commission is not controversial enough. So, but I'm just saying that a lot of these small organizations, indigenous organizations, community-based organizations, which are part of NGOs and civil society, I agree with you. They are the actual voice of the people. We're affiliated with many of them, but again, their issues don't get into the press. And all of the oil money in the world is not going to, as you say, Paul, agree 100, 200% with you, is going to make a whiff of difference. Just look at Trinidad and Tobago. 100 years of oil. 100 years of oil. Look at where they are today. Probably, apart from Jamaica, the most violent society. The gap between rich and poor is enormous and growing. They've had over 400 oil spills that have affected communities and community livelihoods on a continuum. That is Trinidad and Tobago next door to us. And they had the same nonsense going on about the oil money is going to fix everything and bring social justice and so on. It is just not true. I just want to end up by saying, Paul, if the Berbice people, if that petition, you can send it, you can certainly send it to me and to Fred.
But it's not only,
yes, but,
Vanda, it's not only Berbice. I investigated the East Coast, and I investigated with police officers.
Yes,
Paul,
yes. This noise pollution is
the
noise pollution is terrible. If you read the EPA law, there is a whole chapter in it on noise pollution. The EPA does not do anything. They keep saying they're under-resourced, may be true. But the government of Guyana and those organizations in Guyana.
Vanda and Fred, the point I want to make is this. Civil society organizations comes about when there's a vacuum that the powers that be, the political powers that be in government, opposition, wherever, are not responding to issues that are affecting people on a daily basis. And there is where civil society comes about. But I have not heard from civil society either, in as much I have not heard from the politicians, a comprehensive articulation of the causes of this broken society. Because if we don't have that analysis, if we can't explain why in 56 years all we have achieved is the third poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, then how in the name of God are we going to come up with ideas?
Well, I think
what I'm hearing about is about oil, is about civil society, it didn't support an election. I'm hearing all kind of things. And look at the newspapers. If I do a content analysis, there is nothing about this comprehensive understanding that the society is
but
broken.
Paul, the term we have used, and civil society has written and has lobbied and has held Zoom conferences and so on, the term that we used is a divided society. I agree with you that it is also a broken society because all of what we've said here before about political partisanship, it is divided. And therefore, yes, it is broken. And yes, civil society has a ton of work to do. As you know, civil society are all volunteers. We're citizens in our organizations. I believe that we do raise our voice on a number of issues, and the community-based organizations are often ignored, but they are the voice of the people out there. And I was about to say, I'm sorry you don't have an indigenous rep on the program today, because the indigenous people can tell you about how, what is the level of their well-being and poverty and lack of this and lack of that.
I'm aware. And we are going to continue every now and again. I only do this as a public service, Floyd and I, once a month, but we are going to come back because we think civil society has a very important role to play. So now we have a few minutes left. So what I'd like to ask is that the point I want to make is that the challenges we face in Guyana, as we said, government, civil society, relations, challenges and opportunities. The challenge we face goes beyond the political parties. The challenge we face go beyond the divide of the race group. The challenge we face is that the society is the third poorest society. It's broken, and Guyanese are migrating at a very fast rate. So that is part of the challenge. So I'd like to close the program by asking Floyd, and then Timothy, and then Fred, and then Vanda, if you would like to make one last comment about how you see the challenges and opportunities for civil society government relations, going in the direction of being useful and helpful to move Guyana forward. Timothy?
I've been laughing to myself because from her tone, I got the impression that Vanda was quarreling with me. But from the content of what she said, we were agreeing on everything. So I've been a bit puzzled. Let me say in agreement once again that the issue in our society and the division in our society and the fracture and the break and any other word you want to use in our society is caused and perpetuated and maintained by one ethnic party versus the other ethnic party. And any group that gets involved is tainted when they land on one side or the other, and is perceived to be tainted if they make any statement that it's either supportive or critical. The party loyalists don't care. So they will criticize the other side and they will support their own. And that is the fracture and that is the divide. It is a brainless, mindless, blind ethnic allegiance. The Natural Resources Fund, which is what everybody's worrying about. The act was passed by the previous before they left office. And it was designed in a way that eventually and ultimately would give access to that government so that they would have the ability to collect the money and do what they wanted with it without accountability. The new government came and the new government said, that act you passed doesn't require accountability from you. And the party supporters who supported APNU, and those who supported PPP. And none of them that I've spoken to can discuss intelligently the aspects of the first act, which gave lack of accountability and gave access to the money. So the PPP implemented their own act. And the new Natural Resources Fund Act allows PPP access to the money without accountability.
Yes.
And the same APNU people who did not criticize their own government are now loud in their criticism of this one. Walk out of parliament and all kind of thing. No difference in the act. And the PPP supporters who had quarreled when APNU did it and said they were an illegal government, they shouldn't have been passing legislation, when precisely the same problematic legislation is replaced and reintroduced, are now silent in support of their party. That is our fracture. Blind, mindless adherence that allows us to continue down the slippery slope because nobody cares. The other side is evil and therefore our side must be good. That's where we are. So we'll continue where we are.
Yeah.
Floyd, government, civil society relations, how we can get it on a good track.
Yeah, well, let me first say, but I don't think Guyana is broken. I'll take a slightly different view. Guyana has a lot of problems. The problems run deep, and they didn't start 2 years ago. And I commend people like Vanda, who's been in the forefront of this struggle 30 odd years. She has walked the walk. But Guyana's problems are very complex. And what we tend to do is oversimplify complex problems. We take what I call adaptive problems. These are problems that requires complex solution. And we simplify it by saying it's the government, is the leader, is that leader. That is an oversimplification of a very complex problem. Guyana's problems are cultural, it's all types of things, right? But there are some good things. Guyana is on the move and Guyana can do well. We don't have to go down the road of some of these failed oil states. But it's up to us, the people. It's for civil society. You know, one of the good things about democracies is democracies have self-correcting mechanisms. It's called an election. Elections are self-correcting mechanisms in democracy. And the people will have a shot at it in 2025. Okay, so for Guyana's oil wealth to benefit all of Guyana, and right now the divide between rich and poor is huge, but it's not unlike any other country with this huge gap. Doesn't have to be that way. For all of the Guyanese people to benefit, people like Vanda and Mr. Collins and these people have to continue their advocacy on behalf of the people and hold the government accountable. Anything short of that, we're going to continue talking about this, and we'll be back here several years from now talking the same talk. This has been on for 56 years, like you say.
Fred and Vanda, we have run out of time, but I take 1 minute and give us your last reflection on this matter. Fred?
Yes. You hearing me?
Of course.
Yes, I want to say, first of all, that I'm very glad that I heard something from Mr. Haynes that we can take away as we're in agreement with that. That's a nice way to end the program. I want to say we're no voices against a broken society. What we have is a culture of safety and silence. Both parties have created that. We have that in our article. Secondly, I want to say that, again, as we put in writing, we consider that we have a cordial relationship with some members of the PPP. They have invited us to be a participated, and there is really no reason for this except the propagandist approach. They need to define an enemy. So that's what propagandists do all the time. And we value the cordial part of it. We're going to work with whoever wants to work with us. Whenever they call us, as they have done in the past, we will be there. With regard to, people need to understand as well that TIGI consists of members of both parties. Let us get that very clear. TIGI is not an organization that excludes members of any party. So there will be, what that means is that in a situation like what developed in the election, there are going to be people tugging at us from both sides. And so whenever we come out, it is because we have struggled to negotiate the path to make a statement in spite of those competitive forces. People need to understand that.
Okay, Fred, I'm running out of time. We're going to have to wind up.
Good, man.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you very much for being on the program. Vanda, you have the last word.
Yes, so I would like to actually agree with everything that Timothy said. And my brother Timothy, I'm not quarreling. I was passionately defending community-based organizations in the light of Paul's statement and the way in which organizations of citizens organizations work round the clock on major issues, for vulnerable groups. I just want to end by saying, however, that in terms of where we can go from here, Paul, many of us in civil society have been calling for a temporary moratorium on the drill, baby drill, oil madness that has gripped the government and the private sector. I believe we need some breathing space. Some of us feel as if there is a knee on our neck, and you know where that reference comes from, in terms of taking stock of where we are, what we are, how can we actually improve and learn the lessons from our neighbor Trinidad in terms of natural resources fund, the broad representation that kind of oversight committee needs, that encompasses all Guyanese of all persuasions. But we need breathing space, have a pause, let us take stock, see where we are. Why are environmental impact assessments not being done for every oil and gas exploration? This is the only forum, an environmental and social impact assessment, which is within the EPA law, that allows citizens and experts and scientists to come together and to review what the project is. I am calling, and many of us, I'm joining my voice with those calling for a pause, a moratorium temporarily for us all as a nation to take stock and to get it right. Because the slippery slope we are falling down is not getting it right. We are on the way to becoming just another Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank all our panelists who have contributed in a wonderful way to the whole discussion about civil society and government relations. We look forward to Guyana deepening its democratic roots and building institutions that would allow citizens to be able to participate and engage, as one speaker said, in lobbying and discussions and engagement, and not in confrontation, because it's a small society and we have a lot of problems. So until next time, I'm Paul Nehru, Tennessee for Globespan.